Hello there, and welcome to episode 13 of Kolonization Project. We start this episode off by returning to the Duna 1 probe, which we got to Duna in the last episode, and we're just moving it into an orbit which has been assigned for this spacecraft. It's just a simple equatorial orbit, but that does mean that we have to do an inclination change, which is why I have an eccentric orbit, because if you're doing inclination changes, having an eccentric orbit is always more efficient, because of like orbital mechanics. I don't really understand it, but I know how it works. But we're just moving it into an equatorial orbit, and getting some money from completing the contract, I guess. Now that is done, we can continue on to the next thing that we're going to do, which is land on Ike. So the Delta V did change here, because I was trying to get it to complete a contract for orbiting Duna, but it didn't have enough fuel for that, so just returned it to Ike. And if you look at the two values, we have just enough fuel to land, like just enough. So we are going to have to do some quite efficient landing burns here, because there's not too much margin for error here. But now Duna is rising over the horizon, which I thought was a pretty cool shot. Also, I tried to land here because, well, obviously, Ike is actually in a geostationary, and it's tidally locked to Duna. So, like, it will actually be in the same place in the sky. Duna will be in the same place at the sky. Anyway, we are coming down. We have just enough Delta V. We slam into the surface a bit too hard, but thankfully 2 of the solar panels actually survived, so that was cut quite fine, if I don't say so myself. Now that's done, we can transmit some science and go on. Wait, no, we're not doing that yet. We're just collecting some more science, and now that that's done, we can move on to the next mission, which will be in just a second. I forget the order. Yes, the Duna 2 probe. We are actually going to land this on Duna. I was rather surprised to see that the solar panels wouldn't break off, because we can't actually retract these solar panels. These are the ones that you can't retract. So if the solar panels failed, then the mission, well, I don't want to say the mission had failed, because the mission was a pretty good success, but we couldn't transmit any of the science back. But I was surprised to see that the solar panels wouldn't break off. We have a lot more Delta V margin in this one compared to Duna 2, so we can perform a bit more of an inefficient burn to get onto the ground, but we managed to do that without breaking any solar panels, because we have 2 left. We don't want to be breaking those 2, because those are only solar panels, and batteries on this are quite small. Once again, transmitting the science back, and as you can see, we have quite a bit of science stored. 418, I think that was. So yeah, we're actually getting a lot of science in this episode, because we are going both Duna and Eve. So we get some quite sizable progress along the tech tree. I was trying to do a biome hop here, but we didn't have enough fuel to do that, so I just re-landed it back. Something exploded. That's fine though, it was just a reserve fuel tank. And also the rocks are floating. I think this is a bug with Galaxies Unbound because it adds so many planets, but oh well, just ignore them. The rocks are floating. Nothing unusual here. But now that that's done, we can unlock a new tech node. One new tech node, which is heavy aerodynamics, which gives us, I think it gives us the space shuttle. Yeah, it gives us space shuttle part. So maybe we will be building space shuttles in future episodes. Next up, we are returning to the Lunar Gateway, where the tourists that we launched in the last episode have completed. They want to go home now, so we are returning them in our crew transfer vehicle. It took a bit of messing around with the maneuver nodes to get us on an intercept with Kerman's atmosphere, because of the inclined orbit. Thank goodness it's not in a polar orbit. Like, we could get a couple extra biomes by doing that, but other than like the poles and a couple other craters, it wouldn't really have much advantage, and we could only leave and arrive at certain, well, we could arrive anytime, but we could only leave at certain points. But I wasn't sure when I created the Lunar Gateway whether to put it in a equatorial inclined or polar orbit, so I just put it in a 45-degree inclined orbit. Anyways, we are returning back and entering the atmosphere. These are actually the first crew members to return from the Lunar Gateway, because the original crew is still up there. We'll probably return them sometime soon, even though they can stay up there for a long time. But you know, they might want to come home and see their friends and family. But anyways, now we are re-entering. Actually, these are the first Kerbals to return from the Mun for a while. Like, we haven't really done many crewed missions lately. We've been doing interplanetary probes. The crew cabin was about to overheat, so I just tried spinning. That's always a good trick. And it worked well. Like, I think the reason why spinning works so well in atmospheric reentry is that you're distributing the heat. Although I'm not sure. That's probably why, though. But they have landed safely. No one died. Thank goodness. And we can actually unlock another tech node, which is scanning tech. I think. And now we get our first glimpse at Eve, which is going to be the primary target for this episode. For some reason, the thing paused here. I'm not sure why. Oh, never mind. Now we are returning to another vehicle, the scanners, that are performing its capture burn. There will be a lot of switching between missions, because we launched 4 of these probes to go to all of the different moons. So, yeah, a lot of different probes, a lot of different switches between scenes. And we can now go to the Eve lander, which is performing its capture burn. So we won't be landing on we will be completing everything that involves Eve in this episode. Once this episode is complete, we won't have any missions to resume around Eve. Like, we won't be landing on any other extra bodies, because, well, we assigned a certain lander for each thing. It's not like the Duna probes, where we just sent like scanners out there. We actually sent dedicated landers out here. So, yeah. Now we are returning to the Gilly lander, which is performing its capture burn. Yeah, we are performing a lot of switches, like I said, and getting it on its course to Gilly. I used MacJub for this because getting an encounter with Gilly is actually really hard because the sphere of influence is extremely tiny. What are we doing now? Oh yeah, we are resuming the Eve relays. The capture burn, I don't know where it went, but I didn't have it on recording. So essentially what we did, we captured an orbit of Eve, and then we released the first relay, and we are now getting the second relay on a course to Gilly because we want one relay around Eve, and we want another relay around Gilly. So each probe can have its own. Each planet can have its own relay, so we can always bounce signals from there to the Kerbal Space Center. Now the Eve scanners are performing its course correction to get on to an intercept with Gilly. Once again, we have two of these. One's going to go into orbit around Eve, another one's going to go into orbit around Gilly. And also the Gilly lander is performing its course correction. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of switches, like I said. And like there isn't really much time for me to talk about anything else because we're switching between them so quickly. Next up, we can get our first glimpse at Gilly now. Yeah, we're doing a lot in this episode. Like, we are actually not launching any rockets from Kerbin, which I think is the first time we're doing this. We're just resuming the missions from previous episodes that we've launched. We're just continuing. We're just resuming those because, well, they're arriving, and we don't want to miss them arriving because they would just go flying past the planet, and that's not good. Once again, performing the capture burn around Gilly with the Eve scanners. I should really call them by their normal names. They're the Horizon probes, right? Yeah. Although I forget the naming ones, like which one's Horizon 1. I mean, Horizon 1 is the Eve lander, though I forget all the other ones. And also, the Eve scanners are the ones that have all the scientific data on it. So, I also forgot to put on more than 36 units of electric charge on here. So, we have a bit of trouble with data, but you can just set the antennas to allow partial, and those will work. It will work even if you don't have enough electric charge, which I think is a good feature because I always forget to put enough electric charge on spacecraft. Next up, Gilly lander is performing its capture burn, and we might actually be landing it within this. I'm not sure what to call it. Scene switch, I guess. You may notice that the small little ant engine on the lander is actually a bit offset from the center. That's because of the mystery goo. This lander is actually so light that the what was I gonna say? That the mystery goo actually it contributes a significant amount of mass to the spacecraft. But Gilly, this lander is absolutely tiny. It's the smallest I could make it and it's still overkill for landing on Gilly, because orbital velocity around Gilly is like 20 meters per second, probably even less. And this lander has something like 400 meters per second. So, yeah, we have a lot of extra delta V, and we can even visit all of the biomes on Gilly. I was actually quite surprised to find out that there were only 3 without even using up probably 3/4. Like, we use 3/4 of our fuel, probably even less. And those fuel tanks that you see on the side, those are the only fuel tanks we have. Like, this lander was designed to land on Gilly, and it basically can't land anywhere else. It might be able to land on, like, some other bodies, actually, now that I think about it, because it has, like, 400 meters per second. So it actually has quite a significant amount of delta V for a lander of its size, which I found quite surprising. Anyways, now what we're doing is we are resuming the Eve lander. This will actually be the first, like, actual real atmospheric entry that on another planet, that is. Like some of the other planet, like Duna, you don't need a heat shield to re-enter on Duna. Eve, if you enter the atmosphere without a heat shield, you're almost guaranteed to lose your craft. So we just slow down in the upper atmosphere and then fall towards the surface. You can see me doing a bit of corrections with the angle of attack, because I thought that we were going to land in the water, and I don't want to land in the water because the water might be like rocket fuel. I've heard a couple of theories about what the oceans of Eve are. I'm not sure what they are. Like, there's a Explodium Sea, which may make it seem like it's rocket fuel, but I'm not sure. Anyways, we can now detach the heat shield and reveal the lander. I went for sort of a Mars, like, the Mars, like, Curiosity rover, like Curiosity or Perseverance, like how they detach from the aeroshell. I was sort of going for that kind of look, and I think by messing around with the procedural fairings, I think it turned out quite nicely. We're coming in for a landing, using parachutes, of course, because it's quite inefficient to use anything but parachutes on Eve, because the atmosphere is so thick that parachutes are actually really effective. Also, what we just did, we landed. One of the landing legs did fall off. I was having a bit of issues with the landing legs, but we eventually get to the point where only one of them will explode and the entire craft won't shake itself apart. Now we have 1,000 science, which is a lot of science. So we can unlock a tech, upgrade the R&D facility, and unlock very heavy rocketry, and also we can unlock nuclear propulsion. So that gives us Nervas, which are extremely efficient, and it also gives us Starship parts. So that is rather exciting. We might be using Starship in the future for our main launch vehicle. Now what we're doing is we are crashing this booster into the surface of Gilly. The Gilly lander has a seismometer, which can register impacts on the surface. I cannot speak properly today, but we are crashing it into the surface for science, and also just become a piece of space junk otherwise. But goodbye, booster. You have served us well, but it's for science. And now what we can do is we can head back to the Gilly lander that we landed. And we can actually collect the impact data from it and transmit it back, which gives us quite a large amount of science, 400 science to be exact, which is a lot of science. And that gives us the ability to unlock advanced metalworks. And we are once again returning to the Gilly lander, where we are performing a small little biome hop over to the highlands, and then we're going to go to the lowlands. Once again, floating rocks in the far corner, but just ignore the floating rocks. Just ignore them. They aren't there. They never were. But we can actually get quite a bit of science by just hopping around Gilly and getting science, because it's like, see how little delta V it takes to biome hop. Like, it takes like 10 meters per second, 20 meters per second to slow down. I was actually, once again, I was quite surprised to find out that there were only 3 biomes on Gilly: the highlands, the midlands, and the lowlands. But I mean, I guess that's what you get when you have a something this small. Like, it's so easy to land on that it would effectively just be like cheating if like you could visit if there are a lot of biomes. Anyways, we are performing a course correction with the Gilly landers to get it, not the Gilly lander, the what's it called? The Eve scanners to get it into a polar orbit. Yeah, we're getting it into a polar orbit so it can actually start scanning the surface. And we have landed in the lowlands, which is probably the last time you're ever going to see this Gilly lander, unless we visit it in a future manned mission to even Gilly. I actually have a lot of plans for a mining outpost on Gilly, because it obviously has such a low gravity that landing things are quite easy. Now we can get automation and return back to the automation tech node and return back to the scanners. What was I just saying? It was something about, oh yeah, plans for Gilly. It's so easy to land like large things on Gilly that we might as well use it for like a rocket production facility once we colonize the Eve system, and it'll actually serve as a gateway for colonizing Moho, which I also have big plans for. Colonizing Moho. You may be asking yourself, why colonize a barren rock so close to the sun? And I'm not going to spoil it yet, but I actually have quite big plans for Moho as well. I honestly think that we're going to colonize Duna first, though, because Duna, well, it's Duna, it's like Mars, so it's sort of like, it has a sizable gravity, which means that we won't need that much to land and return. It also has an atmosphere, but I honestly just think it's a better target than Eve. Anyways, now what we're doing is we are getting the, what's it called? The Eve scanners. Yeah, the Eve scanners. We're getting it into a polar orbit around Eve so I can start scanning Eve, because with Astronomer's visual pack installed, we can actually not see the surface of Eve. I've said Eve way too many times, and like I always have something that I say a lot of, like, but like always, there are always a lot of pauses in my videos, but like I always have like if we're going somewhere, then I'm gonna say the name of that place a lot, like Eve or Gilly or Duna. Once again, with Astronomer's visual pack, the surface, like, we cannot see it at all. Like, if you look at it right now, it's all covered by clouds. You really can't see anything. So the Eve scanner is especially important, because if we want to be landing in precise locations, i.e. not in the ocean, we will want to be able to see the surface. And I guess the scanner is probably using like something like infrared, because like we can't really use visual, because if you're seeing something like a cloud, like the visual light is going to be bouncing off of it. But if you use something like infrared, it's going to be able to penetrate through the clouds and onto the surface, which will actually allow us to scan the surface. And now we can get that into an orbit, do some science, because this is the one with a lot of science. And then we can land. We're not landing on Gilly again, especially not with a probe like this. It doesn't have a heat shield. We'll just burn up in the atmosphere. We can head back to the R&D center any minute now, and unlock 2 tech nodes. Composites and something else. I forget what it was. But that will actually bring us to the end of the episode. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.